Unit 7, Animal Talk, page 50.
All the things with space.
Okay, let's get started. On today's topic of animal communication. I'm just wondering, how many of you have pets? Dogs, cats, birds, any kind of pet? Oh, quite a few, I see. In my case, I have a golden retriever. I'd certainly like to think that I'm able to communicate with him. But what kind of communication are we really engaging in? Actually, this is a very interesting and controversial question because, in many ways, it's difficult to compare animals and humans. Humans are one species, and there are many species of animals. And each species has its own way of communicating, and some of those forms of communication are completely different from what we use. For instance, some types of fish use electrical currents to communicate. Some insects use vibrations. And bats use ultrasonic signals. And then there's the sense of smell. Even though humans try to cover natural body odors with soap and deodorant and perfume, odor is a common method of communicating for many animals. So, you see, animal communication is really not very straightforward. So, today, I would like to simplify matters. Although we acknowledge the fact that animals communicate in different ways, today we're only going to consider whether animals can use language as we know it. In other words, language that is composed of words and that has a grammar. Today, now, I'd like to consider 3 questions. First, what do animal sounds mean? Second, do animals intend to communicate? And third, do animals speak in sentences? All right, the first question that I just mentioned was what animal sounds mean. Now, to understand this, we need to take a close look at different types of communication. These can be divided into 2 types: affective communication and symbolic communication. Affective communication involves the communication of emotion. Humans use affective communication when we laugh, when we cry. And much of our nonverbal communication is this affective communication. We show a great deal of feeling with our facial expressions, gestures, and so on. Of course, animals can also express emotion. And this is one of the reasons why we love our pets so much. They're expressive in many ways. Dogs, in particular, are popular in many cultures because they're so good at appearing happy, pained, and sad. They even seem to mirror human feelings. For instance, when I'm feeling down or I've had a hard day, my dog becomes quiet and actually looks a little sad or tired himself. Well, that's my experience, but in any case, almost all scientists agree that most higher-order animals like dogs and cats can use affective communication. So, one answer to our first question is that many animal sounds communicate what we can call an emotional state. Now, remember that I said there is a second type of communication, symbolic. Symbolic communication is information about a specific referent that can be encoded by a signaler and decoded by a receiver. Now, that's rather complicated, so let me give you an example. If I say the word Brazil, the referent in this case is the actual country, Brazil, because I'm referring to the country. I encode this referent with a set of sounds. If you understand that referent and the set of sounds, then you'll be able to decode or translate the sounds and understand the referent. That is, you'll understand that I'm talking about a country in South America. Now, can animals do that? Well, the answer appears to be yes. But because their vocabularies are so limited, it's probably safe to say that they can use very little symbolic communication. For instance, scientists have confirmed that one type of monkey in Africa, the vervet monkey, clearly makes different alarm calls. One type of call is very general and seems to communicate the idea of watch out or stay alert. Monkeys that hear this call begin to look around more and act more careful. They're less tranquil, less relaxed than usual, and they're less willing to leave the safety of nearby trees. Other calls now are quite specific. There's a call that monkeys use when they see a leopard, a different call for eagles, and yet a different call for snakes. Now, the interesting thing is that there's every indication that monkeys use these calls in a symbolic way. For instance, when a vervet monkey hears a leopard call, it often runs for a particular type of tree that leopards can't climb easily. When the monkeys hear an eagle alarm call, they immediately stop what they're doing and begin scanning the sky. When they hear the snake call, they stand up straight and scan the ground in the immediate area. Now, in addition to alarm calls, animals such as monkeys and birds use food calls. Now, these calls not only let others know that food has been found, but they can also sometimes give information about how much and what quality of food has been found. Now, another interesting point, which isn't well understood, is that some animals such as chickens seem to use food calls deceptively. In other words, sometimes chickens will use a call to indicate that they have found food even when they haven't. So what does this mean? Do chickens lie? Are they intentionally deceitful? This is a sophisticated use of communication, but few scientists are willing to admit that chickens are consciously trying to deceive other chickens, because they don't appear to have the intelligence for that kind of thinking. The second question concerns whether animals actually intend to communicate. In other words, do animals care if there is another animal nearby who will hear their call? Well, the answer is yes. It appears that animals do care about this. Wild birds call out when they spot something important like food or an enemy, but they only do this when other birds are present. On the other hand, they're frequently silent in the same situations when no other birds of their species are around. So birds are apparently aware of their own species. Gender is also a factor here. For example, male chickens will call out more often when female chickens are nearby. And there's even a difference depending on whether the chicken is known or unknown. The male chickens will use food calls most frequently when unknown female chickens are nearby. I guess I should also mention that this phenomenon is not just limited to birds or chickens. Chimpanzees also communicate, far more when other chimps or, in some cases, when humans are present. So the general answer to the second question is yes. It does appear that at least some types of animals are sensitive to the presence of an audience and that they do intend to communicate. Now, I've told you we believe that some animals, such as certain monkeys, can use something like words in a limited way. You'll remember I mentioned it appears that they can say something like eagle, leopard, or snake. But humans can use grammar, so we communicate different meanings by using words in different sequences. So, for instance, I can say, the dog bit the man, and that has one meaning. But if I use the same words but change the sequence and say, the man bit the dog, now I have communicated a very different meaning. Well, this last question is about whether animals can do this too. In other words, can they use some form of grammar? What do you think? Well, the answer is that there is no recorded natural example of animals making anything like a sentence or using the order of a sequence of sounds to communicate symbolic meaning. The monkeys and birds we've been talking about can make alarm calls or food calls quickly or slowly, loudly or softly, but they never seem to manipulate the sequence. Even the birds that seem to be saying a lot of good food are communicating that idea with one identical call that doesn't change. They're not using grammar, as far as anyone can tell. Now, one group of animals that is able to manipulate their language is songbirds. As you're probably aware, many wild birds sing rather complex bird songs. And these songs are created by combining a variety of notes in many different patterns. Some birds have hundreds of phrases that they use in thousands of different combinations. However, Contrary to what you might believe, there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that birds can communicate any symbolic meaning by manipulating these musical notes and phrases. Instead, they seem to use their songs just as a way of advertising themselves, or attracting a mate, or maybe even expressing some type of emotion. Well, now, today, we began with 3 questions, and I'd like to return to those questions once again. First, what do animal sounds mean? In most cases, we think they communicate what we would call emotion or affective meaning. But in some cases, they stand for specific things in the environment, like food and the presence of danger. Second, do animals consciously intend to communicate? Well, generally, I suppose the answer is yes, though having an audience that understands the message is an important factor. And third, do animals use grammar? Here, the answer seems to be no. If animals use some type of grammar, it's nothing that scientists have been able to identify and confirm. One reason for this is that using grammar requires far more mental processing and far more sophisticated memory than using a simple vocabulary with no grammar. And this may be the obstacle for animals. They don't have the brain power. Some animals do have the brain power to use a very limited number of individual words in a rigid, inflexible way, but they can't acquire thousands and thousands of words like human beings and then manipulate those words using grammar. The thing that really sets humans apart from animals is our incredible ability to use language symbolically, produce the same words in many different combinations, and assign different meanings to those combinations. In short, grammar is an innovation that only humans have been able to develop. So although I might prefer to believe that when I get home tonight, my dog will say something like, "Nice to see you, let's go outside and play frisbee," he's probably really communicating something more like happy, happy, or hungry, hungry. But I'll settle for that, because we communicate pretty well with each other. All right. Now that's it for today. Are there any questions? No? Okay. Will you please read chapters 6 and 7 before next class? And I'll see you then.